So now we've looked at some conceptual ideas behind NgRx effects. What we're going to do is actually just dive into actually using it. There's no easy way to actually start learning NgRx effects on its own. We need to hook it in and start using it straight away. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Now, what we want to do in our products component, we're going to dispatch our first action. Now at the moment we have a reference to from store, and what we need to do is now pass our actions up to our components so we can access them via this from store alias. So what we want to do inside this actions folder, next to our pizza actions, we'll just create an index.ts. Now inside of here we want to export everything from, and then we want to export the pizzas.action. So what this will do when we access /store/actions, we can already start referencing each particular action without importing each file individually and having all these imports clogging up the top of our component files. So we'll save this. We just need export everything from the pizzas action, and we can close that. Now also what we need to adjust is inside our store folder, we have another index.ts. At the moment, we're just exporting everything from the reducers. However, we need to also export everything from the actions folder. So this will allow us to use that from store alias in our products component. So once you've done that, save it out. We'll just close these off. So what this means is right now is that we are actually just using the initial state from the reducer. But it might be a good idea now to actually introduce where we can dispatch an action to call our first load event. And as we start to build these pieces piece by piece, we'll slowly start to unravel what NgRx store and NgRx effects give us. So inside the on init of this component, what we're going to do is say this.store, and we're going to call a dispatch. Now we've done this already in the initial chapter where we built our own store. So what we're going to do is create this new instance from the store, and we're going to say load pizzas. And we can just call that as a function and simply just save it out. So we are creating our first action. We're going to say load the pizzas, and actually at the moment in our reducer, if we just take a quick look, we already are listening to this load the pizzas. So at this point in time, the store has then called the reducer, and we are returning this new state to say that loading is true. So I'm not sure about you, but it doesn't really look like we can get any data through this reducer. We're waiting, however, for this load pizza success. So this is where NgRx effects comes into play. We want to set up an effect to listen to our load pizzas. It's going to make the request using one of our services, and then we're going to dispatch from the effect the load pizza success, where we will be able to obtain the new state, which is completely driven from our server inside that db.json. So we don't need these files for now. I'm just simply going to close them off, and we can just focus on our store folder. Now inside the store folder, we want to create an effects folder. So inside of this effects folder, we want to create a file. So let's go ahead and create pizzas.effect.ts. So inside of this file, our role with the effect is to actually listen for that load pizzas action, and then we're going to produce a different side effect. Now the side effect in this case is we're actually communicating via HTTP to our local server, and then we're going to bring that information back, and then we're going to dispatch a new action saying that the request was successful. So let's get started. As per usual, we want to create an injectable, and we can grab that from @angular/core. Then we can say @injectable, and we want to export a class called pizzas effects. So let's go ahead and add a constructor. Now all an effect is essentially a class which contains a few properties which happen to be observables. Now our observables get called by NgRx effects and kind of in a way act like a reducer, so it allows us to respond to different events and do different things. Now the role of a reducer is to actually deal with pure JavaScript state and immutable objects. In this case, we're going to be listening to some events that are actually dispatched. However, we're going to be dealing with observable streams. And in our case, we're going to use our pizza service to then go and fetch some pizzas and then dispatch a new success action when they come back from the server. So what we need to do to actually get this going, we need to import something called the effect, and we also need to import the actions. Both of these come from NgRx effects. Now let's first talk about actions. Actions is an observable. We can then listen to the types of actions that are being dispatched and respond to them accordingly. Now let's go ahead and actually start using them. So let's just say private actions, and here I'm going to actually add the dollar on the end to denote that this is an observable, and we can say that's going to be of type actions. So what we actually want to do on our effects class, I'm going to create a property called load pizzas with the dollar on the end because it's going to be an observable. Then what we can say is the load pizzas equals this.actions, and what this observable gives us, you can see here that we have this of type. So we can actually say that we want to listen to an action of the type, and this is where we can import some of our actions and do something when they are actually dispatched. So at the moment we haven't imported any of our actions, so let's go ahead and say import everything as, and we'll call this one the pizza actions, and we get that from back one directory in our actions folder, and then that pizzas.action. So at this point in time, we can say that we want to listen to one of our pizza actions, and we have the opportunity to listen to load pizzas fail, and load pizza success. Now, because in our component we have just dispatched that load pizzas, so let's actually just go back just to clarify what's happening. We have this dispatch, we're saying we want to load the pizzas. Now, because this is our action creator, inside of here, we have this load underscore pizzas. So we are just referencing that inside of our actions. So we're saying actions of type, we'll listen to that load pizzas. Now this is where we want to perform a side effect. This is an observable stream, and we can add observables to it. We can return new observables. And interestingly enough, Angular's HTTP client module returns an observable, which means it fits directly into an effect absolutely perfectly. Now, if you've actually used NgRx before, you may be used to doing something like this, where we say .map, and then we might have a .filter. Now, there's actually a new change which we're going to start using because it's really nice API. It also helps with the bundle size and tree shaking because we can remove all the code. And this approach here, where we have .map and .filter, at the top, usually we'd have to do something like import rxjs/operator/map/filter, these kind of things. And these actually attach themselves to the observable prototype, whereas now we can use a pure function approach. So this is the recommended way, and what we do is actually use something called a pipe. So you can see here that at the end of this observable, I have the pipe operator fully available. Now the pipe doesn't really do much itself, but we can then pass functions such as filter, exhaust map, switch map, all these types of things go inside the pipe, and this just simply contains a stream of pure functions instead of chaining them with the prototype operators. So this will make more sense while we actually start using them and importing them. Now we can see if we hover over here that we are actually saying that load pizzas with the dollar is actually an observable with the generic type of action. So this means this effect, when it's executed, we need to return an action. And that is the key to understanding what an effect does. It doesn't do much more than what we're actually looking at. We just need to mark it as an effect and then dispatch a new action back. So let's get step one out of the way. Let's say at effect, and that's all we need to do. We need to say this is an effect. This is pretty much all of the API for NgRx effects that you'll need to use. So we just need to use the @effect decorator, and we can then listen to our observable of actions. What I'm going to do inside of our pipe, we're actually going to start using the switch map. So we'll start off with the switch map. We can get rid of this. Just import that switch map from rxjs/operators. What I'm going to do, I like to just group these together so we have like imports for actions and then anything to deal with effects and observables up here. So inside of our switch map, what we can say is we get the function and we need to return something from this function. The switch map allows us to essentially return a brand new observable, which we can then do things like map over and then dispatch a new action, because that is the point of the effect. We need to return a new action. So at this point in time, we're listening to that load_pizzas. Now we have an opportunity to do something with that load pizzas action. So what we actually want to do, if we just take a quick look in our services, we can see here that we have get pizzas. And I've set this up to point to our API/pizzas, and this is actually going to return us an array of pizzas like we saw earlier on in the previous videos. We have that array in the db.json. So all we need to do is essentially call this get pizzas on the pizza service. So we can close this off, we'll go up to the top, and we want to import this service so we can then dependency inject it into this class and then call the function on it. So what we can say is we want to import, we'll use everything again, we'll say as from services, and we get that from back a few directories, and we could just point at our services folder because there's an index.ts in there, which you can see here, which is just pushing our services up for us so we can access them. Now, what we need to actually do is dependency inject this. So we're going to say private pizza service will then be of type from services, and we'll do dot pizza service. I'll just save that so it neatens things up. And you can see here that we have a nice constructor which injects our actions, and it also injects our pizza service based on the type that we supply it. So we've got the pizza service injected now. We need to start actually using it inside of our switch map. So let's go ahead, and what we'll do is then return, and we can say this dot pizza service, and you can see we have a few methods here. So you can probably guess what's coming up for the rest of this course. We're going to learn how to create the pizza, remove the pizza, update the pizza, and we're going to tie these in with actually treating the router as a single source of truth as well. So we're going to be dispatching actions to navigate around our app and make sure that our client-side app is just held in that single source of truth. So the function that we actually need for this is the get pizzas. So let's go ahead and just simply call that as a function. Now, because this is an observable, we actually have the pipe operator. So you can see that I can just add that on the end. Now, inside of this particular pipe, we want to actually map over the results, because when the map is called, we know that the request has been successful. We can also dispatch the load pizzas fail action if it was unsuccessful. So inside the pipe, I'll put this onto a new line. Now we'll type these out and then we'll go and import the operator momentarily. So once we actually map over this, and you're probably used to doing something like this in your actual service. So let's have a look real quick. Here we're using the pipe operator, and we're just throwing that catch error function in there so we can pick up any errors when the request is made. In previous versions of Angular, you'd probably do something like map on the end. So this is what we're basically doing, but we're doing it after the observable has been returned, which means that at this point, we actually get our array of pizzas. And because load pizzas needs us to return an observable of an action, we can say that we want to return new pizza actions, and we want to call the success action. We can then say, give me all of those pizzas. So let's jump up the top and just import this map operator. This is also a really nice approach because we can simply just do something like this. We don't have to keep that stack of imports for the old way of doing things. So this is really nice. Once we've got that imported, everything looks shipshape. We're good to go. We want to add some catch errors in here as well. So let's go back up to the top, and what we'll do is import that afterwards. So we'll say catch error. Now this previously used to be called catch. It's now called catch error because we have the reserved word in JavaScript when we use the try and the catch blocks. So this was renamed to catch error. Now a pipe, they are comma separated. We don't chain them like we do with the dots, like you can see here. We simply just add a comma, and this pipe is essentially just a stream of functions. So at this point, we can say catch error, and we then get the error given to us. This would be given back to us from the server. Now at this point, we can say new pizza actions dot load pizzas fail, and we can pass in that particular error. Now, what we actually need to do in case there is an error, we need to actually return this as an observable. So all we need to do is actually use the of operator, and we can just wrap this nicely inside of here. Now we obviously need to go and import this of. It exists in a slightly different place, so what we'll do is import of, and we get that from rxjs/observable and /of. So once we've got this imported, we can then return an observable of our action. So I'm just going to hit save, and things will reformat slightly because I'm using the prettier. But essentially we want to have this.actions of type. We're listening to that load pizzas, which we've dispatched in the component. We're then creating a pipe. We're saying switch map. We want to switch to our new observable stream. The pizza service get pizzas returns an observable of a pizza array. We can then map over it. We get given the pizzas, and we want to now dispatch a brand new action saying that the request was 100% successful, and here are the new pizzas. The effect allows us to communicate with the outside world, and then the whole idea is that we bring data back to our reducer. So let's actually just dive across, and you can see in here that we have this load pizza success. So this means that we can access the action.payload, and this point in time we are talking to our new array of pizzas from our server. So there's a couple more things that we need to do to actually get our effects up and running. This is the code for the effect. We need to go and register it in our module. Now inside of the effects folder, just like in our actions, we're going to create an index.ts file. So what we need to do is import the pizzas effects, and we get that from current directory pizzas effect. Now what we want to do, and this is a really nice approach that I like, is we can just maintain everything in this one file. So we can say export const effects. So we're going to basically create an array of effects. We can give it a type of any array, and we can just simply pass that pizzas effects as the first value. So this means that in our module, we can just import the effects and just register them as a whole. We don't need to keep importing things. And it ends up with this really big module file with all these imports everywhere. So this keeps things nice and clean and consistent. The final piece, we'll just quickly export everything from the current directory pizzas.effect. So that's pretty much what we need to do. We can save this out. We're importing our pizza effect, which we just created, and we're exporting a property called effects, which means that in our products module, we can go into our store. You see this line here, we have import reducers because we pass everything up. And in making this change inside of the index.ts, so there's one more change that we need to make here, which is exporting those effects and passing them back up. Once we've done that, we can then import the effects. Now, if we hover over this, you can see that that is actually an array containing one class, which is our pizza effects. So what we need to do now is actually import the effects module from NgRx effects. So let's say import the effects module, and we get that from NgRx effects. Now we'll take this and we'll jump down into our ng module, and underneath here, I'm just going to add this underneath. Just like NgRx store module, we have this for feature available to us. Now, because we've imported the effects, and you can see the TypeScript window pop up here, it says that a type of any array. Now, because our effects is an array of effects, we can just simply pass that in. And you can see the module definition here. It's nice and easy to read. We're just using some variables that we're composing and exporting in other files. So once you've done this, we should have a complete round trip for our effects class. So let's just recap what's happened. We're listening to this load pizzas event. We're dispatching that in the component. We're then using a switch map to switch to a brand new stream, which means that this is the action that is returned to our effect. Now, by default, an effect will dispatch an action. We do have the option, and you may find a use case for this, but you can actually add dispatch false. So this is an option. This will dispatch by default. If we say dispatch false, then nothing is going to be dispatched. So In our case, we do want to dispatch an action, so we're just going to leave that, and the default for the dispatch is true. So typically you'll be using it exactly like this, and just keep in mind that if you don't want to use the dispatch, then you can just say dispatch false. So at this point, we're returning this new action, and the effects will dispatch that action back to our reducer. So let's jump inside our pizza's reducer and look at this pizza success. What we're going to do, if we quickly just have a look at this, we can say action.payload. We're going to get given that from the effect because it's dealing with the side effects. It's dealing with outside of the Angular world with our server. So let's save this out and go and check it out in the browser and see what it gives us. So back in the browser, we don't have any visual changes with our application. However, you should see a console log in the pizza reducer. You should see an array of 3 pizzas. So momentarily, we're going to hook these up to our DOM. We're going to show them in the template. We're going to merge this state with the store. So what we're actually going to do, we can say const, and we can say data equals the action.payload. Now what we're going to do, we have one pizza already in this data array. So I'm going to completely remove this. You can go ahead and just reset it essentially to a brand new empty array. We'll just keep it nice and clean. So typically we set things up with the initial state. We can populate any values that we like. And then what we want to do is actually rebind this data. So at this point in time, we're saying merge all the existing state, change loading to false because we've now loaded, which we're going to indicate as true. And then we just simply want to bind that data, which is that array, back to the state. So let's save this out and go and check this out in the browser one last time. So back in the browser, we should hopefully end up with 3 pizzas that have been dispatched. We've done a complete round trip. In just a few videos, really, we've learned the basics of NgRx stores actions, the reducers, and then we've moved on to using an effect to deal with some actual data so we can bring that back and put it in the store.